Future Warrior, The Mars Campaign. Chapter 8. The silver pen twirled, its shiny surface glinting under the bright artificial light. It was a rare display of frustration from the normally inscrutable man who held it dexterously in his left hand. The pen froze mid-twirl. "You are sure of this information?" "Yes, sir. I double-checked it myself. The decrypts are conclusive. The Red Legion forces at Tharsis had advanced warning of our battle plan. They knew exactly when and where we were going to hit them." The man's storm-gray eyes imperceptibly hardened, like icy water solidifying. "Make inquiries, task whatever assets you need. We have a leak, seal it." The pen resumed its silent twirling. "Yes, General, it will be done." General Jacob de Veers, the head of the United Earth League, UEL, Intelligence Branch, didn't look up as the head of the Internal Security Section left. The Intelligence Branch had been established under the original UEL Charter and was the single most powerful and far-reaching organ of the League's government. Despite nominally coming under the jurisdiction of the UEL High Council, in reality the Intelligence Branch was a law unto itself and carried out its mission of ensuring the security of the UEL in the shadows. De Veers examined the report again before passing it to his waiting adjutant, one of the few people in which he placed any measure of trust. The decrypted Red Legion communications revealed that they had received information from a source in the UEDF, a source codenamed Lazarus. The name meant nothing to De Veers, his only recollection being that it was a name from a biblical story, a story of a dead man brought back to life. De Veers knew that the information exposed was only cleared at a high level. That meant that either the traitor was high-ranking or that the enemy agent was competent. De Veers allowed the pen to twirl for a moment longer, then brought it down to resume his work. If there was a traitor in the UEDF ranks, he or she would meet with an unfortunate accident. If, on the other hand, there was an enemy infiltrator in the fleet, De Veers would have some quiet words with them. Then they too would meet with an accident. Stalker found himself back in a welcome place, the slightly warmed interior of a billet at FOB Phoenix. He felt like he was 100 years old. Every muscle was protesting the abuse he had put his body through, and he had some bruises that he would be sporting for some time. As he lay on a bunk, Stalker couldn't help but smile thinking of the reaction he had got earlier that day when he had brought his scarred his suit to the armory. The Terra Nova Master Armor couldn't believe his eyes, having only given it to him a few days before. It wouldn't be the only suit from the 21st Company being turned in for repair, Stalker knew. The armorers of the Terra Nova would be working long and hard over the coming days to get the division's fighting units fully re-equipped. News had also begun to filter in during the day of the 9th Infantry's progress. As part of the recently deployed 7th Infantry Corps, the division had taken part in the assault and seizure of the atmospheric converters and other terraforming facilities located in Tharsis City. The news was that losses had been mercifully light. It seemed that between the Terra Nova and Praetorian Division, the UEDF had effectively broken the enemy's back. Current intel confirming that 2 complete Red Legion infantry corps had been virtually annihilated during the bitter fighting on the slope and subsequent street-to-street fighting in the city. It all seemed like a glorious success, with the UEDF sweeping or crushing the enemy before them. Stalker, however, knew different to the watered-down version that was being fed to the civilians back home. The Red Legion's level of resistance and organization since the Elysium landings had come as a real shock to TACCOM and STRATCOM. The UEDF had been caught wrong-footed on the Tharsis Plateau and would have been pushed off if not for the timely deployment of the relatively fresh Terra Nova and Praetorian assault divisions, which in turn had seen hard fighting in the frantic efforts to stabilize the situation. The facts as they stood were that it had taken 5 UEA Corps, the 6th Infantry, 7th Infantry, 9th Infantry, 10th Mechanized, and the elite 3rd Assault to hold and eventually push back the 2 Red Legion Corps, now identified as the 5th and 6th Red Guard Corps, both of which were newly formed and inexperienced. The Reds had fought tenaciously, exacting a heavy price on the UEDF, much heavier than the public knew. The Terra Nova, for its part, had been effectively shattered over the previous week's hard fighting and was now well below half strength. The losses were so severe that STRATCOM had decided to pull the division off the line and completely rebuild it. Despite this, morale in the Terra Nova was still very high, and it was the elite men and their attitude that would be the glue that kept the division together when it was eventually brought back to operational status, when over half its numbers would be new recruits. New recruits to the assault divisions, however, were not new in the traditional sense, as all Terra Nova members were veterans before ever entering the division. Any soldier from any other unit in the UEDF could apply to join the assault divisions, and competition for the honor of serving in the 10 was intense. Only after review of their records by a Terra Nova officer and grueling physical trials could a soldier be accepted into the division and undertake the training in the specialist equipment, tactics, and traditions of the Terra Nova with the division's 10th Regiment. With the Terra Nova now out of the fight, it had appeared to Stalker that he would be sitting the rest of the war out in the rear areas as the long process of rebuilding the division got underway. TACCOM, however, had other plans, the 21st Company's record in the preceding battles not going unnoticed. D and Stalker had been called to a meeting with a TACCOM officer and the CO of the 2nd Regiment. They had been forced to go in basic military uniform due to their EEAs being repaired, and Stalker could see D was uncomfortable without it. He had felt the same way. Those suits became your second home after a while, and Stalker felt naked out of his. The meeting was brief, and its content totally unexpected. Stalker and D were to proceed as soon as possible to a new FOB, one of dozens that were springing up all over Mars. This particular one was located in Cydonia, and had been designated a rest and relaxation area due to Cydonia's non-existent strategic importance and complete lack of enemy activity. The region of Cydonia had been scouted after the Elysium operation. It was the agricultural hub of Mars and consisted of low, gently sloping terrain and hills covered with fields of food and energy crops which stretched over 1,000 kilometers. The wall of fields only broken up by occasional rocky outcrops, unsealed roads, and scattered settlements. There had been no sign of the enemy in Cydonia other than the usual automated defenses left behind to hinder and slow down the UEDF's advance. The lack of resistance was not entirely unexpected, as the Red Legion had been fighting a defensive delaying action since day one, and the terrain of Cydonia didn't lend itself to defense. Cydonia was a vast area, and although much of it had not been scouted by ground units, reconnaissance instead being performed by unmanned drones, it had been declared secure by the intelligence branch and was now the designated rest area for many of the worn-out corps used in the earlier actions at Elysium and Tharsis. The region was also being used as a training area for other divisions yet to see action in the campaign, and it was this latter function that brought Stalker and D to the meeting. Their orders had come straight from the top. They and other experienced unit leaders from the Terra Nova, Praetorian, and Excalibur divisions would join the worn-out and green divisions already there and undertake a twofold mission. They would firstly bring the fresh divisions up to a high rate of combat readiness, educating them in the nature of tactical operations in the Martian theater. Secondly, they would assess applicants from the blooded divisions that were seeking to join the elite assault forces, and if they proved acceptable, train and qualify them the use of assault forces equipment, such as the EEA suits and impulse rifles. Although sad to be leaving their division behind, both Stalker and Big D felt a new sense of purpose. They were not only going to help train green soldiers in the weapons and tactics that best suited Mars, they were going to do something much closer to their hearts. They were going to take a personal hand in rebuilding the Terra Nova, something in which they were both keen to get involved. 12 hours later, Stalker and Big D stepped off the lowered loading ramp of HTT and onto a freshly laid Plascrete transport landing pad at the newly established FOB Warlock. Looking to the left, Stalker could see hundreds of LTTs, HTTs, Swift-Foot-class assault transports, and a smaller number of the far larger heavy cargo transports, HCTs, that brought men and heavy equipment from the fleet in orbit. All were swarming with activity. There were also a smaller number of nimble F-55 Dark Star V/SDOL fighters and Sleep Predator gunships sitting on the deck, with their crews standing around in small groups talking. Directly ahead was the base proper with its thousands of prefab billets and portable command and control facilities, To the right was FOB Warlock's vehicle marshalling area, with row upon row of military vehicles of every conceivable type, many of them showing signs of damage. One thing that did catch stalkers, I was a separate zone of the marshalling area in which stood several dozen motionless mechs and striders. They never failed to impress Stalker, looking like giant steel guardians, the machines oozing menace and firepower. Stalker knew from a mission brief that they belonged to the 521st Mech Battalion, the famed Blue Sabres. The assembled mechs of all different types painted in a blue and gray splinter pattern, complete with an emblem of a blue saber on each shoulder. Even motionless and lined up in parade formation, they took one's breath away, with the exception of the new and much larger Goliaths. They were the ultimate in force projection, the best technology and training that Earth had to offer. A private wearing patches of the 312th Infantry hurried up to them and asked to see their orders. The private plugged the memory stick into a handheld pad, and with a beep it cleared them as valid, and he handed them back. You are in billets E-1021 and E-1022 specialists. Very good, Private. Where is the deck officer? Growled D. He's over there supervising the unloading of HCT. Can you see him, sir? Yes, I see him. Very good. Thank you, Private. The deck officer was the on-duty officer in charge of the landing area, and after seeing him they moved off and got straight to work, meeting with the head training officer and getting their timetables and a stack of applicants' profiles to review before they hit the ground running in the morning. Stalker was up before sunrise, and after eating a nutritious but bland-looking meal, he emerged from the mess just in time to see the first rays of a brilliant Martian sunrise creep over the horizon. All around him the base already hummed with activity. Stalker considered their first order of business. They had been given a company of the newly arrived 312th Infantry to whip into shape, and it was something he intended to put his full energy into. The men stood before them in parade detail, all their kits spotlessly clean, looking like it had just been taken from storage. That isn't going to last, Stalker thought. Standing off to the left, Stalker watched as Big D addressed the assembled men from Charlie Company of the 312th Infantry Division. Listen up, forget everything you have heard in the press about the Red Legion. They are not weak, they are not poorly equipped, they are not small in number, but they most definitely do want to kill every single one of you. D's voice rung out loud and clear thanks to the amplification unit in his EEA helmet. What you're going to face, what has brought you across the gulf of space far from your homes and loved ones, is not a few fanatical amateurs. I have fought the Reds. They are tough, they are smart, and they are prepared to die as long as they take a few of you with them. This made a few of the men stand up a little straighter. I landed on the first day at Elysium Prime. I have seen and faced human wave assaults, small unit actions, combined armor and infantry operations, and been assaulted by striders. It is now my sorry task to get you ready so that you might just make it home alive. Make no mistake, people, this thing is far from cakewalk, and it is far from over. They spent the next 10 hours drilling Charlie Company mercilessly in close combat weapons drill, hand-to-hand tactics, and platoon and company-level defensive patterns incorporating interlocking fire techniques. As the sun set, Stalker found himself standing next to Big D on top of a Warthog APC, watching a very dirty and tired Charlie Company assault a cluster of abandoned farmhouses. They moved in on foot in good tactical formation, platoon covering. Platoon as they moved from cover to cover, all going well as they closed in on the imaginary enemy, but unknown to them, D and Stalker had a little surprise up their sleeves. As the infantry platoons closed with the building, they deployed heavy machine guns and flanked the buildings in a semi-pincer movement. Without warning, from between the buildings rose a strider. It was painted in blue and gray splinter camouflage and bore a blue-bladed saber on each shoulder. With a whoosh and a cloud of dust, it boosted into the air straight over the advancing platoons and heavy machine guns, landing behind them and opening fire with its autocannon, the metallic ripping sound of its fire filling to air. It then boosted around the flank of the left hand of the pincer on its ion thrusters, all the time pouring fire into the shocked infantry, before boosting across the length of the entire company, and while still in the air, firing rockets from its shoulder pods, the battlefield filling with thick smoke. It then briefly landed before, with a spring of its jointed legs, it again took flight and landed gracefully behind the warthog, D waving to its pilot and giving him the thumbs up. Stalker shook his head as he listened to the chaos over the company's commnet. It was a complete breakdown of command and control, even as he watched the NCOs and the company's captain try to restore order and unit cohesion. But their efforts met with little success in the thick smoke and confusion. It took a few minutes, but things eventually settled down, and the captain stormed up to the warthog, apocalyptic with rage and swearing every name under the Martian sun. D calmly stepped down from the APC and confronted the man. "You, sir, are dead along with 90% of your company. What did you do wrong?" The man just stood there dumbfounded, seemingly out of profanities. "The first thing you did wrong was assume that the enemy didn't have armor, mechs, or striders in the area." The man began to speak, but D silenced him. "And if you shut up long enough, I might just teach you a few things that will keep you and your men alive." The words died on the man's lips. "The second thing you did wrong was placing your base of fire too close to the objective. Your machine guns cannot adequately cover your men or the angles from that close." The man just nodded, apparently lost for words. "And the third thing you did wrong was not having any anti-armor weapons in your company." The captain, flushed with indignation, began to protest. "We only just deployed. We weren't issued any anti." D cut him off mid-sentence. "I don't care what you were issued with, Captain. You're not on Earth now. You're in a war zone facing an enemy with advanced mechanized units. Do you understand? Beg, borrow, or steal, I don't care, but never go into action against the enemy without as many missiles, slap anti-tank rockets, and heat grenades as you and your men can carry. I made the mistake myself, and it almost cost the lives of my men, and I'm here so you can learn from that mistake." Stalker watched the man go back to his company. D had come down on him hard, but Stalker knew it was necessary. Stalker also knew that D blamed himself for the incident with the Red Legion Striders. They had been caught unprepared. It had been a simple oversight after so many years of dealing with poorly equipped rebels, pirates, and dissident political movements. It seemed that they all had lessons to learn, and Stalker knew that combat was the steepest learning curve of them all. They pulled the same trick with some small variations to a number of companies over the following week, and every time the results were similar and egos were bruised, but all went away from the experience wiser and with a better idea of what they were up against. Meanwhile, the news from the front had continued to come in. Tharsis had finally been declared clear of the enemy, which for days after the city was taken had continued to hound the UEDF by emerging from tunnels and hides all over the city and the surrounding mountains to ambush patrols, shoot down transports, and long-range sniper senior officers. As much as Stalker enjoyed training the Green troops, he indeed could now finally get down to the real business of starting to train the Terra Nova recruits who had passed the initial service record and experience screenings. They had been assigned 20 recruits. All were veterans with combat experience on Mars and other theaters. A number of them had also been part of the forces that had halted one of the Red Legion pincers on the Tharsis slopes, and were coming from units that had taken near 100% losses in the fighting. Stalker watched them standing around a warthog waiting for the training to begin. Some were leaning casually on the APC and chatting. All moved with swagger and talked only when they had something to say. The men handled their weapons casually but confidently, as if they were extensions of their own bodies. Most had come from infantry units, but a few were mechanized infantry, and one was from an artillery unit that had fought hand-to-hand as they were overrun during the counterattack on the Tharsis Plateau. D arrived, and they started to form ranks, but he dismissed them with a wave of his hand. "I'm no officer, and this isn't the infantry." A few exchanged glances before they relaxed and stood at ease. "You men are here because you want to join the Terra Nova, and it is my job to decide if any of you are good enough for that honor, and to show you the equipment used by the assault forces. You will need to learn, and learn quick. By the end of today, you will either be a member of the Terra Nova or RTU, return to unit, on the first available transport." This brought a few glances between the men and grins from others. Being in the Terra Nova is not a job. It's a calling, it's not a mission. It's an operation. The Terra Nova has a history dating back over 2 centuries filled with glory, honors, and sacrifice in the service of Earth. D looked at them, and a few stood a little straighter. The Terra Nova dates back to the unification of Earth and was founded as one of the original 10, the first and the finest units of the UEDF at the establishment of the Union. Our motto is death to all, and those of you that make it will learn its meaning well. We do not surrender, we do not take prisoners, unless asked nicely, of course. That brought a few chuckles, and we never withdraw, no matter the circumstances or the cost. We are the ones they call to plug a critical gap, or to hold the line no matter the odds. We are the ones they call to take an objective no matter how well defended, safe in the knowledge that the Terra Nova will get the job done where all others have failed. Dee paused and looked over the assembled men in front of him. Those of you who think you're good enough and want the responsibility, take a step forward. As one of the assembled men, all took a step towards Dee, and Stalker thought he could see a glimmer in Big D's eye as he watched from the sidelines. The men looked determined. That was a good sign. Physical fitness, morale, conviction, intelligence, and confidence were vital to make a good soldier, and the men appeared to have them all in spades. All of you have studied the specs on extreme environment armor and have been measured for the suit you may receive if you survive today. So let's look at something a little more fun. This, D said, holding it aloft, is an ASBR 103, an assault special purpose rifle type 103 impulse weapon. It is the standard weapon of the Terra Nova, the other assault divisions, and many other UDF special units. He tossed it to the nearest soldier, who caught it, and without even thinking, smoothly brought into the ready position. Pass it around, and take a look. You will be training with them today. Take time to notice the guide rails on the magazine port, the automated target acquisition sights with thermal and infrared settings, integrated M503 pump-action grenade launcher, wireless camera system, laser designator, and molded polymer grips. Stalker handed Big D his impulse rifle and walked up to the soldier, inspecting D's rifle. "Can I have your IW-30? The man unslung it and handed the rifle to him. Stalker checked it was loaded and walked back to D. They had arranged a small demonstration. D spoke up. "You men see that there?" He pointed to an Ironhide IFV they had towed out to the range earlier that morning after it was assessed a total loss for battle damage it had suffered in Tharsis, and the base mechanics had finished cannibalizing it for parts. Hanging on its side was a brand-new SBA suit, the same as worn by the recruits. Next to it was Stalker's old EEA suit, or more correctly the shell of it, after it too had been stripped of vital systems. Stalker had collected it after the armor decided not to repair it due to cost and time factors. The recruits nodded. One is your standard battle armor, and the other is an EEA suit that has already suffered damage in battle. Stalker raised the IW-30 to his shoulder and carefully squeezed off 20 rounds at each of the sets of tactical body armor before ejecting the empty magazine onto the ground. Following D and Stalker, they all moved up and inspected the results. The SBA suit had fared quite well. Only a few of the rounds had penetrated the thinner parts of the carapace, and none would have proven fatal. The EEA, despite being already damaged, had let no rounds through, and the user would not have even been wounded. The recruits were very impressed, some of them glancing disconcertingly at their own SBA. The EEA suit is virtually impervious to the standard 9mm armor-piercing ammunition used by your IW-30s. This, he said, holding one up between his fingers, is an entirely different animal, a 12mm caseless explosive-tipped armor-piercing impulse round. D tossed the case to a nearby recruit to look at as they proceeded back to the same spot from where the IW-30 had been fired. D quickly fired 10 rounds from the ASBR at each target. This time when they checked the SBA suit, it had been shredded. One arm was missing, and a number of rounds had passed clean through it and partially penetrated the hull of the Ironhide. The EEA suit, by comparison, had fared considerably better. No rounds had completely penetrated, a number of the ceramic composite plates had been shattered, and some shrapnel had gotten through, but nothing that would have proved fatal to the wearer. There are two lessons to be learned here, gentlemen. One is that the 12mm rounds of your impulse rifle are lethal against most body armor types, and even advanced power armor in the right circumstances. The second lesson is this. He pulled down the shredded SBA suit to reveal the penetrated armor of the IFV. Your rifles are effective against light armored vehicles. Even if you're faced with a mech and have nothing else at your disposal, never give up. Pour as much fire into it as possible. You will destroy weapons, guidance, navigation, and visual systems, and in enough quantity, you might even bring it down. Your rifle is your life. Never go anywhere without it. And when you see your brothers in the Terra Nova shooting, shoot in the same direction. That brought a round of laughter from the tense men and lightened the mood considerably. Now let's go and see if any of you guys can actually shoot. With that, they issued impulse rifles to the recruits. Many of the rifles, despite being cleaned and checked by the armorers, still bearing scratches and signs of the combat that had killed or seriously wounded their former owners. Over the next few hours, they expended a large amount of live ammunition while the recruits got used to the automated targeting system, using light training head rigs in place of full EEA helmets. They also practiced some basic assault tactics using the wrecked Iron Hide as the pretend enemy. And by the end of the session, the IFV looked like someone had taken to it with a rail rifle. Next, they moved on to specific tactics used by the Terra Nova, including assaulting buildings with electro flashbangs. And to top it off, they pulled the same trick at the abandoned buildings with the help of the Blue Saber Strider. To Stalker's relief, they reacted well, immediately getting to cover and giving clear and precise instructions. No one panicked, and using practice ammunition put quite a few rounds into the maneuvering Strider. All in all, Stalker thought he would be comfortable with trusting any of them to watch his back. They were just what the Terra Nova needed to rebuild its strength. Big D then came up with the icing on the cake. Pulling a favor from a friend in the Excalibur division, he got hold of one of their recruit training EEA suits that could be adjusted to fit anyone, unlike the real suits that had to be individually tailored. As the sun set, they showed the recruits firsthand the features of the suit and also put in some very entertaining close combat practice with Stalker, taking on the recruits and beating them one after another. After each match, Stalker demonstrated the tactics and suit features he had used to win. It was the best way to learn, and the recruits learned fast, and by the last recruit, Stalker faced a much greater challenge, but still emerged victorious due to his extensive experience with both the suit and close combat weaponry. The recruits' level of respect for Stalker and D had grown during the day's activities, and there was no longer a hint of the earlier sarcasm from a few of them when they addressed either of them as specialist, a rank they too soon hoped to hold. At the end of the day, under the lights of FOB, Warlock D addressed the assembled men. Every one of you has today proven your skill and desire to become one of us, one of the Terra Nova. I still have to confirm it with my CO, but that's a mere formality. I am satisfied that all of you have what it takes. From this moment on, you are no longer part of your old units. From this moment on, every one of the men and women that wear this symbol, he pointed to the Terra Nova insignia on his shoulder, is your brother or sister, and family is everything. We live together, fight together, and die together. Never forget who you are. You are the children of Earth. You are the sword in her hand, the defender of her people and the deliverer of her justice. You are assault troops and Terra Nova. The small group of men exchanged congratulations and handshakes before all personally thanked Stalker and D for the honor of serving with the Terra Nova. D summed it up for a recruit. Don't thank me. You're Terra Nova. Now you have to prove it. All I expect is that you fight unfalteringly beside me and kill the enemy. The soldier had not responded with bluster or cockiness. Like the others, he was quiet and listened closely, taking the words on board. Stalker watched the men begin to relax as the realization of what they had achieved and the responsibility they now carried dawned on them. He liked what he saw in the men. There was something of himself in all of them.